Yeah.
They have like some, like groups have like a past president, and if a person stays on within
Could we
their
just
responsibilities, stay on without the.
Emeritus.
Yeah, Baker Emeritus.
Yeah, she can be our Baker Emeritus.
Perfect.
You ready to go? All right, guys, we'll get this thing underway here. Welcome, everybody, to the Planning and Parks Committee meeting for Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. So thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll start off by doing a roll call.
Chair Galani,
Here,
Councilmember Clark,
Happy to be here.
Councilmember Dadwell,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher, Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
here.
and we have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go on to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the committee's meeting of Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Councilmember Ottenberg?
Yeah, I'll be happy to make that motion, but I just had one quick, comment on minutes.
Okay.
They're fine as far as I'm concerned. The minutes made reference to the discussion we had at the previous meeting about Bellevue Farms. But I didn't see anything regarding that topic on tonight's agenda. I don't, unless I missed it. Did I miss it?
No, there is nothing on Bellevue Farms on
Okay.
tonight's agenda. The department did meet with representatives of Missouri Department of Conservation and the Friends of Bellevue. Wasn't necessarily a bad meeting, but the grant applications we had submitted, one, they can't fund, and the other, they actually thought the condition of the 20 acres we've already restored was fine and didn't need the grant to basically touch it up. So good and bad. They gave us direction on another grant application, but that'll be after the first of the year, probably have it at the meeting in January.
Okay, that's fine. I just, and I didn't mean to get us sort of like off track right away. If you wanted to provide, an update on this topic, under miscellaneous, that would be fine with me. And effective with that, I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have a second on the motion? Councilmember Dodwell? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Okay, we have one abstention. Okay, and then moving on to the next item on the agenda, I know we have some folks here that would like to do some public participation, which we love. What I'd like to do is ask, I'm assuming everybody here is to speak on the all-inclusive playground, is that right? Okay, if the committee doesn't oppose, I would like to move that item on the agenda up to the first so that we can have our residents speak.
Make a motion, we change the agenda.
Okay, second by Councilmember Rambo. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Awesome, great. Well, that brings us then to the first item on the action items on the agenda, which is the all-inclusive playground in Parks Matters. So Director Vunich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, tonight the department has prepared for you a very short memorandum, topic of an all-inclusive playground. The city in 2015, in an open community park, had the components or a skeleton of an all-inclusive playground. And certainly, as we found over the course of the last 8+ years, advances have been made, new information has been introduced. And so from this perspective of the city, we have a wonderful playground and community park, but one that isn't necessarily all-inclusive and meeting the needs of our residents today. Knowing that, Mayor Boland contacted Tom Lee, our city administrator in the Department of Planning and Parks, and wanted to pursue an understanding of what it would be, what it would take to have an all-inclusive playground in the city of Wildwood. And to that end, Mr. Lee and I met today with All-Inclusive Playground and two of their representatives. And we met at one of our park sites just to discuss the potential of using that as a location for one. As the discussion proceeded, it became clear that we needed two things from that consultant construction firm, and that is First and foremost, kind of an idea of that, if that particular park site would work. And then another, just a general estimate. As is noted in the memorandum, this type of playground, all-inclusive, is not identified in the 5-year capital improvement plan or in our strategic plan. But from the perspective of the mayor and the direction we received, we are just doing those initial steps in the investigation. The intent, based upon Mr. Lee and I's meeting today, is to engage that particular firm without any objections from committee tonight, and at least begin that groundwork. It may take a year, it may take 2 or 3 years before the city's in a position to construct an all-inclusive playground. But we've got to start somewhere, and the thought is today is as good a day as any. And so with that, if there's any questions about the next steps, again, from the perspective of engaging the consultant or the location we are at today, any of those things along those lines, Melanie and I would be glad to try to respond to them. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Director Vunich. So I'll start out by asking the residents that are present if they would like to speak. Now,
Sure.
there we go. Okay, let's do that. So first of all, I'll just say thank you very much for coming out here tonight and joining us and taking the time to come here and share your thoughts, and we appreciate that. And with that being said, I'll let Ms. Ripito lead it off.
Okay, the first speaker card that I have is for Miss Natalie Fletcher.
That's me. I did not write anything except for just like last night, oh, I should write something. So I actually teach in a co-teaching, this is my co-teacher right here, Kathy, special education. I'm the special education teacher in our co-teaching classroom, and we teach the Early Childhood Center for Rockwood. So daily we get to interact with kids that are both typically developing and have special education needs, be it physical or whatever that may be. But we get to see in the classroom just the beautiful interaction of kids that, like I said, are typically developing and those that have all kinds of needs. And seeing them interact side by side in the classroom is such a gift to us to see them grow and develop bonds and friendships. And I just think it would be something beautiful to see happen in the community so that parents like Chelsea and other parents not only have an opportunity for their kids to interact with others at school, but actually go outside in the community and form relationships and meet up at a place that is accessible for all children to be. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker card I have is Kathy LaRocco.
So just really good evening to everyone. So my name is Kathy LaRocco. I've actually lived in Wildwood for 19 years, or at least the 19 years. I love living in Wildwood, and I have to say I'm blessed with a very amazing neighbors, amazing community. My husband always jokes that Joe, he came to our house and knocked on our door one day, and we were talking about the pothole in front of our house, and the next day it was fixed. So he always says my buddy Joe. So I just had to throw that out there. It's kind of a funny little thing that we have going in our house. So, but I've also been a teacher for Rockwood for over 20 years. I teach regular ed with Natalie as a co-teacher, but I've been a special ed teacher for most of my career with kids who have autism, who are like significantly delayed in autism, with the sensory needs, the physical needs, the language needs, you name it, every need across the book. I've witnessed the joy and the sadness. I've witnessed the miracles, the pain with all the kids that I teach. I've worked with every ability in all the 20 years that I have taught rare diseases with kids who are 1 of 4 in the world. 300. I've worked with, and I know, genetics is coming along, but it's just amazing, crazy amazing how genetics is helping out everybody. And just recently, one of my students, Willow, she passed away beginning of the school year, and she was like 1 of 4 in the world with her disease. And she loved, my point bringing her up is she loved being in the classroom. She was very limited in what she could do. She was in an adapted wheelchair, but the communication nonverbally was amazing. She loved her peers. She loved being on the playground. She loved being outside in the fresh air with all of her peers and being super happy with them. So that was just such a big thing for me. So I just think it would be amazing to have a local playground for her. It would have been nice to have a local playground for her to have come and played with her peers, because her peers loved her. They fought over who's gonna push the wheelchair. Hunter's our kid. They fight over who's gonna hold their hand, who's gonna help them push the button to help them say go, just things like that. So it's just an amazing thing to see. I've always worked with kids with different abilities. I will say I'm very passionate about our local community having opportunities for every kid with every ability. I created at Marquette High School, the Dazzlers program, which is an inclusive dance team, which they performed at the basketball and the football games at the school. And it was so welcomed, and it was such an amazing experience for kids who have everything in their life to be able to sit and work with kids who don't have everything in their life, and to see the change more so in the kids who have every ability, like just very amazing. And then just more recently, I worked with World Class All-Star Dance Gym, and I just had to leave because of personal things, but a competitive dance team for kids with disabilities. We went to Orlando and competed. We go to local things to compete, and just to see them being able to be out in the community and to be part of everything that every other kid is available to do. And that's why I bring all those up, just because a playground is such a simple thing to include everybody in our community. And Wildwood is such, like I said, I've lived here for 19 years and I love every minute of living in here. So, I just hope that we can have a place that can meet. I know it might take a little time, but it just would, I know it would mean the world to parents to see their kids be happy on the playground. And it would mean so much to the kids, like Hunter just playing today in the motor room when we can't go outside, just the happiness and the joy in all of the kids. It's just an important piece. So thank you for listening.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker card I have is for Valerie Peterson.
Hi, that's me. Mine's a little more formal because I wrote it. I'm not as good off the cuff as Kathy is. But I'm Val Peterson. I'm a nurse at Rockwood Early Childhood, where 50% of the students that I care for have special education services. As a member of the school community that supports children with complex needs, I'm well aware of the hundreds of children that would not only benefit, but thrive with accessibility to a play space that would allow them to safely and joyfully play alongside their peers. Rockwood nurses annually submit numbers to the state that break down numbers of specific needs and diagnoses in our district. I can't speak to the number of those that are just in Wildwood, but the district has thousands of students who receive some sort of special care. Some of those students have significant medical needs and disabilities that are visible to the community, but a larger portion have needs that may be less noticeable or invisible. Children with autism and other neurodivergent learners can experience just as many limitations and challenges as a child with the more visible disabilities. Our community needs play areas that can not only be accessible to those in wheelchairs, but to all children who need a safe place to play and develop independence on their own, regardless of their differences. I'd like to point out that our Wildwood parks, in addition to all the school playgrounds around here, they would all be considered accessible to those in wheelchairs and strollers and walkers, but being able to access a playground and be on the actual surface is very different than actually being on the structure itself and getting to play alongside of the kids that are on the actual structure. The city took great effort to create large, beautiful parks and playgrounds that so many can enjoy daily. Unfortunately, the actual playground structures lack accessibility for our children. Our community lacks parks with structures that kids with complex medical needs can access, other than the obligatory adaptive swing chair. It will serve all residents when our playgrounds are chosen so that children of all ages and abilities can play, be challenged, and have fun together. It says so much about a city when its government chooses to care for everyone and not just the majority, especially when, as our numbers show, there are so many more children that would benefit from an adaptive and inclusive playground than we realize at first glance.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and the last speaker card that I have is for Chelsea Bellew.
Yes. That's me, last one. My name is Chelsea. I'm a 4th generation Wildwood resident. I've lived here my entire life, and now I'm raising my 2 children in the same area. My son Hunter was diagnosed with a rare, ultra rare brain disease at the age of 3, which primarily affects his ability to walk. He was born healthy, hit every milestone until he bumped his head one evening, which is what caused the onset of the progression of the disease. Up until age of 3, I would take both my kids to all the community parks available in the area. But once Hunter was diagnosed, we were unable to participate in those visits
to the park became less and less. And it wasn't because he didn't want to, it wasn't because he, didn't remember going before. Cognitively, he's unaffected. So he still wants to participate in all things that he did before. He also wants to do everything all the other kids his age are doing. As you can imagine, not being able to walk, how difficult it would be to suddenly not be able to do what you were doing before and play with at those same parks like he did before with the kids. Given that he can only now scoot or crawl, sometimes use his walker, the grounds at all of the parks are very much inaccessible to him. Not only is he unable to get to any of the activities, but once he does, nothing there he's able to do independently. So in my mind, anything that is ground level play, sandboxes, splash pads, anything that's ground level would be great for children like him. Also in wheelchairs that they can actually wheel into and they don't have to utilize stairs or anything like that. Also, accessible bathrooms with changing tables that have a weight capacity that doesn't have, the capacity is not, 30 pounds because, my son is over 40 pounds. He's 5 years old. He's still in diapers, but, there's many other children that are special needs that are in diapers way past the age of 5. And the last thing parents want to do is have to change their child on the floor of the bathroom, which I know personally that happens all the time, or the back of their car like I do. So this is just my story. I'm one person, one child. There are clearly thousands just in our community, just in Wildwood. So this type of playground would impact so many children on so many different levels and areas. I know we're really fortunate where our son is with his disease. So I've seen firsthand what this type of addition can do for our community. I've seen it in different states. I've seen it in different communities in Missouri. And I really urge everyone to kind of take a look at how impactful it would be in ours. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All four of you for coming and speaking tonight. We really appreciate the input and you guys taking your time to come here and share your thoughts. So appreciate it.
The opportunity.
And Director Vulich, I know we'll have a discussion on this in a moment. Is there any specific direction the department is seeking from the committee today?
If you don't mind, just so I can read it into the record, we do have some comments that we received prior to the meeting.
Sorry,
that-
go ahead.
No worries, that we will distribute after the meeting
Okay.
to the committee.
Mr. Chair, what the department would request of the committee is an endorsement to engage the consultant for no more than $10,000 to assist us with creating a concept and a cost estimate for a facility such as been described.
You would like to make a motion?
I will, if you're looking for a motion, I will make that motion.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, do we have a second? Councilman Dodd? Any discussion on the motion?
I look
I had
forward.
questions for Joe.
Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead and ask your questions first.
Where did you go?
Today we went to Glencoe City Park.
Okay.
Couple of reasons. It's probably the park that has the largest amount of undeveloped space. And it is also an area where we have ample parking. And the thought was, and this came from Mayor Boland, is it's near equine assisted therapy. So there is a linkage there between the two types of uses. And so, and if you want to be, let's say, integrated into the community, that is probably our most popular area in terms of just attendance day in and day out. So all people would be able to interact, at least from the standpoint we're bringing a group together in a single location.
Sure. So it didn't register on me that accessible bathrooms aren't necessarily accessible bathrooms because of the changing area and so on and so forth. Are there, do you feel confident in our restrooms, or is there more work we can do? Because that sounds like a really cheap thing to do, is just, fix that first.
Embarrassingly, I will say they're accessible, but it requires somebody to turn a handle,
Okay.
push a door.
Okay.
And then once we are inside the restroom, they're accessible from the standpoint of the
Yeah.
60-inch radius. But again, I don't know if we've done everything we can, so I'm embarrassed to say that, but we have a solution. We'll start looking into all of that. Like in Community Park, we have 3 restrooms, men's, the women's, and the family. Converting the family to something that was just described, where somebody can just push the button, the door opens, and there's facilities in there to accommodate them. And I apologize. In 2014, when we were designing the park, it was just not something that was on the radar. We
Yeah.
engaged experts from all over the country to help us.
Well, things have evolved evidently, but I would suggest that if we engage this consultant, that we say, what can we do globally for, some reasonable figure, just, pick it, to make the bathrooms truly accessible. And evidently there's some, we could add a piece of more accessible equipment at each park instead of just having one, this is our accessible park, because that puts people off in a corner instead of letting them join in whatever park they happen to go to, so.
I understand it, and there's a story behind each of the facilities. Anniversary Park, we purchased that restroom from a company that had been, so to speak, stiffed by another community. They had it, they ordered it, the company built it, and then they reneged on the purchase. We got it for a reduced price because Anniversary Park for many years didn't have a restroom at all. So they say, I think retrofitting these is going to be the next step. If All Inclusive can include that as part of their proposal, to take a look at each of our restrooms and tell us what would be appropriate and how to do it. And then I think that's the solution, at least a good start.
Yeah, so my thought is, this is our opportunity to find out costs for, like maybe per piece of equipment or something. I mean, just get a good handle on what we're up against for this $10,000. But I do want to say that Ms. Clark has been leading the charge on accessibility from her very first day here. And so she won't let this one go.
Thank you.
Speaking of which, Ms. Councilmember Clark, you're up.
Yeah, well, I think that this is a great direction that we're going, and that just tonight, we had a few speakers give a few things that we can start thinking about. And the bathrooms as being a great example of that. And I'm sure there's a lot more things that they have gone through and examples they can give. So I really encourage us to take their time to gather as much as we can from them, to include them if they are willing to be included in putting this together, along with the expert the developers given us an idea. We need to include them because they're the only ones that know the true needs of this, and they live it. And sometimes, knowing, because I have a disabled child, that you go through this and you don't even think to tell somebody because you just make it work, or you do something else and you just think, well, that can't be changed. And, I'm all about open our minds and change it. So I really encourage us to keep these mothers and Val, the nurse, and the teachers, and all these people involved in helping us along the way if they're willing to do it.
Certainly, as you know, we've recently been talking about Kurtner Park and a planning process for that. And key amongst all the steps that we described as a committee indoors was going to public together to help us make the decisions. And so it's one of the reasons we do speaker cards is we get your information and we can find you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark and Director Budich. Councilmember Dodwell?
Well, I want to reiterate what Teresa had just mentioned, that I think we need to get more definitive input from all of you, because you say we wish we had certain equipment. I don't know what kind of equipment that is. I don't know where we would source that equipment. And so getting that kind of feedback from you all, even if it's just an email to Joe so that he can share it with us later. And then as we get closer into, okay, how are we gonna design this? We can come knock on your door and say, okay, you're gonna have to use this equipment. Is this the kind of equipment that you feel is sufficient, effective, capable of aiding your students, your children, our citizens here in Wildwood? So I just want to make sure that we keep you continued in your conversations with us as we go forward.
Yeah, I was gonna, I know Councilmember Bartoni had made the motion. Did you second it?
Yes, I
Councilmember
did.
Godwell? So I was gonna ask if you would be opposed to amending that motion to potentially encompass what Director Vunich had mentioned previously, that we give the committee or give the department the going forward to go ahead and have this bid out and looked at building this out on this new park, but also giving us an analysis of the existing parks and not just the bathrooms, but other potential retrofits that could be done to some of the existing playgrounds, like a splash pad or things like that, that could be added to some of the facilities we already have to make them more inclusive. To Councilmember Rambo's previous comment, as opposed to just having it all in one place, and maybe there could be some accommodations made across the board. And if we're having them look at it, we're gonna look at everything at once.
I can almost guarantee if we expand that net, and I'm not objecting to that, to cover the other park facilities in the city of Wildwood, we're probably easily going to exceed that $10,000 limit that the city administrator has. What I would suggest is let's get started. We're looking at one location. We'll, as we build on that, we'll see where we're at. If I need to come back to committee, I will, and then we can do a resolution or ordinance or something akin to that.
I'm good with that. Yeah, that's good. Councilmember Godwell?
I concur with that, but I think as we're looking, we need to make sure we document what type of situation X equipment works well in, or what environment does it need around it, so that we can take learn from that park and say, okay, can we fit this in a need that we have at City Park? Can we fit this in a need that we have at Anniversary Park? Things like that, so that we kind of have a catalog of the type of equipment and the type of environment it needs to be in order to support these individuals.
I will do. This met with Natalie McKay and Chuck, one of the big project managers today, along with Mr. Lee. I'll just send her an email. I owe them a couple of things relative to Glencoe City Park, and just say, if you don't mind, review the video from tonight and the statements and your and the request of the
Okay.
committee members. That's probably the best way for her to understand
Yeah, what we're looking for.
the extent that we'd like her and her company to be involved.
Yeah. Councilmember Ottenberg?
Are we aware of any local municipalities that have an all-inclusive park that we could use as sort of an example?
There's a list here.
There seems to be a concentration over in St. Charles County.
Okay.
Natalie mentioned today they're working in Queenie Park, which is Wyven Road, Manchester Road. There was a list of facilities on All Inclusive's website that covered the St. Louis region and went well beyond, all the way out to California. In fact, that's where Chuck moved from, California to here. So I guess what I would say is there's a lot of examples out there, both locally and nationally, and I'll send you the link to their website and you can kind of review them. It's a good website. It goes through individual characteristics of each of the playgrounds, so it's kind of very informative.
Okay, great. Councilmember Clark?
And just so that we remember that this is not just for the kids that have disabilities. Whatever we do for them is gonna help all the kids in their plan.
Okay, Councilmember Rambo?
Yeah, so there's probably a good argument for every one of our parks. Glencoe City Park feels a little bit out of the way. And so I was wondering if we have some sort of a location map, or we can engage some of these folks here to find out where, if there's any center of gravity or center of mass for, or, children that could use these parks, maybe Glencoe wouldn't be the right place to start, and I would hate to go too far down that path. So I know I'm asking a lot, Joe, but
Well, I can do a quick summary. If you look at Green Pines Park, we chock full that right of way area. And I mean, we go from edge to edge of.
so it's the right place. So Glencoe's the right place.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in Anniversary Park, we use the non-floodplain area for the improvements we have. The rest of the 14 acres is floodplain or the creek itself. Old Pond School, we have a parking issue. We have just a limited number of
Yeah.
spaces and we don't want to create a problem because we can't park the visitors to the facility. Community Park is a workable one, but anything we do in Community Park, according to our city attorney, requires a vote of the residents now.
Mhm.
And
I
just
thought there
don't
was
know.
a price limit on what that.
It's- The last time we talked with the city attorney and Tom was in that conversation, it was over $3.5 million. Is what the trigger is, and
Yeah.
we far exceeded that.
Oh,
No, I understand that, but there's nothing that says we couldn't
Go to the voters.
implement components
Oh, no.
without a
no.
vote. Or we could go to the voters and indicate that we want to do this.
it's such, that park gets such rave reviews from children. It would be great to make it, more accessible. That's my personal opinion, but,
And there's a couple locations in Community Park that would be, I think, wonderful for a facility of this nature. And it's just a great space.
Okay,
okay, all right. Well,
sounds good.
We have
Well, I
options.
feel like the support is obviously here.
Yep.
So that's good to see. So with that being said, no further discussion. Why don't we take a vote on this and move it forward? So all in favor of the motion for the department to proceed with looking into this and putting something together for us, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Awesome. Thank you so much for your participation and joining us tonight. And thank you for the committee's discussion. Which brings us then to our first item. We'll go back under the planning matters and start off with the first item, which is the reoccupancy permit program, development for rental properties. Ms. Ripito.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Our second item on the agenda is a follow-up conversation on the reoccupancy permit implementation process. And so at the November meeting, after a great discussion and some clarifications provided by St. Louis County via Mr. Jurgens, the committee concluded that although the revised steps of the implementation process made more sense and seemed that they were in a better order, there were still some concepts that needed to be better defined before the city brings this to the public for discussion. And so the department has included in your packet revisions to documents that were previously provided in draft form, and hoping that we got the all of the revisions that we discussed. As you'll see on here, we do now have a section that has minor and just a yes, no. So it was less invasive, than listing people's ages. And we also have on here, do any of the occupants have special needs? And have it marked as optional so that people can choose to fill this out or not fill this out. I also included a signature for both the occupant and the owner, and changed the applicant to principal occupant up at the top. I also, in the FAQs, included just a note in there about why should I answer this question, as to the special needs and or minor and names, things like that, just so that they know why we're asking these questions, that it's important for us to have. Okay. I also included in the packet a residential occupancy inspection guide, which goes far beyond just the, top handful of things that the inspectors will look at. It goes through quite a few things, and it's based off of St. Louis County's list as well as other cities, just to kind of give people an idea. And it also states at the beginning of it that it's not all inclusive because there may be things that are found that aren't necessarily on this, but this gives you a pretty good, you know, overview of what you should be checking for in your property, inside, out, garage, it breaks it all down. And, you know, notes important things like all of the utilities must be on and must be operable and things like that. So the FAQs, I did straighten out the poor language in the, what do I do if, my inspection fails the first time? And added a couple of additional questions on there. I included the, other fire departments, on that one. And then, you know, there are the couple questions about the minors and, special needs. And so that's included in there now. Again, these are just working drafts. And so if we come up with things along the way and or when we have community meetings, if we get any input on that, you know, these are working documents. In addition to that, we also drafted some language that could be included in our municipal code. Most cities that have an occupancy program do have, you know, some kind of I mean, essentially legal recourse, you know, it sets up our parameters of this is, you know, required by law, essentially, and, you know, kind of an overview of when and the repercussions of what happens if you don't, when fees are required. This has not, it's been sent to our city attorney, but we haven't gotten comments back on this. So this again is just a rough draft. We'll also after we get comments back from the city attorney and such, we'll have St. Louis County take a look at it and make sure that nothing conflicts with what they do and what they require. But essentially, it gives us some kind of legal recourse should somebody choose to not comply with our regulations. Again, this is definitely not something that needs to be strictly enforced, and we definitely don't want to welcome our new residents with, you know, here's a big fine for not getting your occupancy permit. It's more for addressing people that are unwilling to comply, or sometimes when you have landlords that are repeat offenders and will continue to have, you know, their spaces occupied and not get the occupancy permits for it. It kind of gives us a legal recourse and also, you know, the ability to fine for such. Okay, and with that, that concludes the department's presentation. However, if there are any questions, comments, the department would be happy to answer them. And our next steps are essentially bringing this to the public, deciding when we're going to have community meetings, how many we want to have, and who we'd like to invite to them.
We'll start out with thank you very much for the presentation.
Absolutely, thank you.
Starting on and for the adjustments that you've made to what we discussed last time. And we'll start out, Councilmember Balchoni.
Thank you. So how do we get the word out? So, and the reason what I'm asking is there's I think there's two houses I know for sure in our subdivision that have been rented out since I've moved. One has had the same person in there the whole time. The other one's about every year there's somebody different. There might be a third house. How do we get the word out to that owner of that house? You now have to have this, go through this step.
If somebody is currently living there, like if they have a tenant, it's not something that we would, you know, have to go in and do an
Right.
occupancy permit now. It would be when they had a change of
Yeah,
tenant or
so let's just say
occupant.
they're having a change.
Correct. And so
January 1st.
if there are residents that we know of that we can reach out to, we can do that. I mean, essentially, the way that we would start is through all of our resources that we have. We would definitely update our website, send it out in the e-newsletter, the Gazette, anything like that. Also, we do send out new resident packets to all of our new residents and would include this information in that. So then if somebody, you know, receives that after they've moved in, they'll say, oh, I didn't get an occupancy permit, and then they can address it that way. And or, you know, a lot of times it's been my experience, HOAs also tend to help out with rental units that are not necessarily in compliance with city regulations. And then we would also do our best to reach out to all of our, you know, rental properties that we're aware of, including multifamily, send something out to the realtors that we have contact information for and such. And so we'll do our very best to notify everyone that we can. And then in addition, invite them to our community meeting so that we can kind of get feedback from them on their thoughts of this.
Okay, so like as a little bit of a follow-up, so is the onus on the person moving in or on the landlord?
I would say both. I would say that the way that the language that, we have here drafted in the code, it's the change of owner, occupant, tenant. And so generally speaking, it's up to the owner of the property to get the occupancy inspection, before somebody moves in, because they have to have it done before somebody moves in. I have known landlords that have required the tenant that's going to move in to have it done, but that's usually an off situation. But so usually it's the person that owns it that would get the inspection, and then there's a separate document, you saw the permit, that would be obtained by the occupant.
Okay, and my last question, on the inspection part itself, is there anything in it that would be exclusive to Wildwood that like St. Louis County wouldn't necessarily have that we have added?
We could do that.
But there's nothing current, I'm not looking to add anything.
Right,
trust me.
well,
I'm just wanting to know, is there anything already added to it that's
Supersedes.
yes, that's Wildwood? unique?
no, I mean, as far as the inspection process is concerned, as of right now, unless we do require something, and St. Louis County is good about, including that if we choose to, but no, it's just based off of property maintenance code, the 2015 property maintenance code and building codes. So if there are violations of those, which is just pretty consistent, period, throughout all communities, then that's what they would essentially write up.
City Administrator Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note when referencing to your question about how could we notify these residents that are moving in to a potential rental property, but also the individuals that own that property. There is a useful tool that the city has at its disposal. We do get and this is where our new resident packets come from, and also our new resident list comes from, is that when someone changes their utilities each month, so say someone moves in, a new name is under the utility bill, the city gets notified of that change. In this case, the city could cross-reference that data, showing the new individual that moved in to the actual ownership data of said parcel or property. And if we notice a discrepancy there, that would be a clear indication that there could be somebody renting that property. And in that case, we could do a prompt follow-up with a letter just stating that this is the new regulation. And if you have any questions, please reach out, but these are required. So that would prompt that individual to call, but that would kind of catch anybody that might be falling into the cracks, on top of obviously working with our HOAs and getting a social media push and just general communication out. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Rattenberg?
Yeah, I was wondering, Melanie, could you put that checklist back up on the screen just for a moment?
Sure. This one?
Yeah, perfect.
Mhm.
So I don't know, I just had a thought, and I guess I would just throw this out to the group, and it's not a big deal really, but where we have the bullet points, would it possibly help encourage people to actually go through this list if instead we put boxes and said, check the boxes off as you review the list?
Sure, we
Mhm.
could absolutely do that. I feel like that's helpful for me.
Yeah,
Visually.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Councilmember Clark?
it's a good idea.
And this may go without writing it down, but should it say somewhere on there, like in, at the end or something about the ADA, requirements? It has to meet with, if there's somebody moving in with,
We can definitely include that.
Councilmember Dodwell?
And then at the end of the checklist, or the inspection guide that you've got here, would it make sense that since we're having them check off that they've done these inspections, that they sign the document to indicate that, yes, they've done these things?
I
Or,
honestly, I feel like this is more for their benefit than for ours.
okay,
You know, the inspector's gonna go through and he's gonna find what he finds, and even if they look at it and say, oh, this looks fine to me, it might not. you
okay,
know,
I see what you're
code.
saying.
And
You said
so,
that-
This is more of a guide. for
Yeah,
them,
this
not
is just
to
to help
You
relate
said that
the
this
actual
list was actually more encompassing than what the actual inspection is.
no, it's not more encompassing than the actual inspection. It's, at the last meeting, it was requested to have, like top handful of things that, fail on inspections
Standouts.
or something like that.
Okay.
And so, I found this to be more thorough and people could actually go through this list as opposed to, listing things like smoke detectors and we could always highlight some of the, most commonly, failed items on there. Or, note any recent changes that are now required versus, last time the house was inspected. Although here, the last time might have been a while ago.
Councilmember Rambo?
Yeah, you probably have already considered this, but in a lot of places in Wildwood, the only utility is power and internet. I assume internet, we're including that as one of the utilities we're gonna verify. But there are also, like, heating is with propane, and there needs to be a certain amount of propane in the tank for the heat to work. You don't want people to move in when the heat's not gonna work. And then the septic system is an additional concern. You can't have problems with your septic system and transition to a new resident. So just if you've addressed those, fine, but I think it's worth looking into that.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And Wildwood does have some unique situations that not all other cities would include on their list. So we will definitely take those into
Director
account.
Lynch?
I would add the potable well.
Yeah, the water.
Councilmember Rottenberg?
Thank you. Just one other idea, Ms. Ripito mentioned, common items that typically an inspector is going to note. So I wonder, would it be wise for us to take this list and start off by listing the top 10 most commonly identified problems that require addressing? I mean, probably the reality is that some people who get this list, they're gonna look at all these items on here and say, I'm not gonna bother checking them all, but if they see that there's 10 items that are the most commonly identified as a problem, maybe they will at least go through those 10 items.
Sure.
Thinking of the
absolutely.
80-20, the 20% of items that make up 80% of the.
Yeah, I was also thinking that we could definitely have like a top 10 list or so on the resident brochure that will get sent out in the resident packets and then have kind of for more information and have a QR code to our very lengthy list here. So,
Okay, so Councilmember Marshall?
I got a whole bunch here, but, well, I just think the septic system, the wells, as Councilman Rambo said, this whole thing kind of got started with solar panel stuff, right? Originally, they were talking about how will you ever get those inspections, and there's really nothing listed there. And I know most rental houses are not gonna have that. But I think if you go out to do an inspection, it does have one. And we know certain fire departments are gonna check it and certain ones won't. But I think those would be other ones. The other one, and I know this would be more the homeowner's issue, is because we do not have the lateral program in for sewer lines. I just know when I bought a house, I had them go ahead and run cameras through there. So there's no broken laterals that I'm gonna inherit in doing that. Does it mean a sewer system's perfect? No. But I think people who are going to sell, and when I sold my house, I mean, I had everything checked on it because I wanted to get the best price I could out of the house then. So a lot of the stuff, a renter is not gonna wanna do that. And so I guess the question would be is really narrow down, what are the things that a rental property would do versus what the other paid inspectors? I mean, when you hire an inspector and they come in and they run the cameras through all of the outgoing sewer lines and those type of things, you pay for that. But I don't think a renter is going to have, the fireplace inspected, for example. And my biggest concern in doing it is how do we get in front of it? Because when you're sending it out after they've got the utilities on, you're never gonna have anything from those people. They're in and they're just not gonna come back and say, oh, by the way. Because then we look at it and say, we can't have furniture in there, you can't have extension cords in there. So I think somehow laying out that whole process to explain
Sure.
how we think it would work best would be helpful. On your form, and I'll give you some of these other notes, on the form that you have with the check boxes, it says at the top, required for rental properties only. And then we come down and we have two boxes, a yes or a no, rental property. I think you could probably take one of those off. So up underneath the permit
Oh,
application, it says required for rental properties only, and then when you drop down, the occupancy information is yes or no.
That was kind of deliberate because you'd be surprised at how many people don't pay attention to for rental only, like it is impressive. And so therefore, having them read that and check that, people will still submit it, and that way we can kind of toss it if it's not necessarily required. And so,
You don't think that's confusing, though? I mean,
um,
I know people don't read it,
sure.
but to me, to say up
can't
here, you
eliminate
only
it.
do it for
That's-
this, and
that's
you
my
actually, wait a
problem.
minute, what am I missing? Then they're gonna call City Hall and ask. The, yeah, it could be. The other area that and these others, I'll just give you just some corrections or typos, things on that. But when you get into the whole appeal process,
Mhm.
how would we be set up to charge a tax? To set up for and then how much time the city administrator has to set up for appeal processes?
So the appeal process in my experience in other cities has actually not been all that extensive. We generally set up kind of a hearing for the person appealing to come in, and on here we have it before the city administrator, but it could be modified. But again, they can come in and appeal, explain their case, and then it's determined. It's generally not a lengthy process, but it gives them an opportunity to, explain why this isn't fair, or why, and then.
I just think that's gonna be a tough one to explain. Or the other question is then how much time is it going to take staff to deal with the appeal process?
Generally, we haven't had a whole lot of appeals,
We
and
don't do this at all now.
But, well, I mean, like, at other cities that I've worked at, there haven't necessarily been a whole lot of appeals, but it's kind of similar to what's in place for, say, grass, appealing, code enforcement appeals process. So,
And I do notice on there about chimney inspections.
Uh-huh.
I had that done at my old house and I had to have some mortaring done at the very top, just 20 years of weather. It's really hard to find people that are certified to come in and check a chimney.
it is true.
And you can hold up a process for 30 days waiting to get that. So I just think we need to be careful that we put it out and we don't find ourselves in a situation where the certain types of inspections will require them a much longer time period
Sure.
in order to do that.
Well, and there's also things like exterior painting or concrete and things like that that tend to be seasonal.
Yep.
And so there is actually a section in here dedicated to temporary occupancy permits that can be given, depending on if it's a life safety issue, like if you don't have operable windows in the bedroom, like we don't want you to stay there because this could be dangerous, there could be a fire, there could be. So if it's a life safety issue, then it isn't something that we would issue a temporary occupancy permit for, but if it was something that
Sure.
just needs to get done and there is no clear like arm and somebody like living there with peeling and chipping paint on,
Yeah.
one side of their house, they will still have to get it done, or they won't receive the full occupancy permit and would be subject to penalties.
Just a couple of the other ones, the reference in here to having screens in the windows.
Uh-huh.
Most people, or at least if they were trying to sell us, would take all those screens out to not have screens in the windows. But it detracts from the price of the house and the windows and
Well,
screens.
you're thinking about
torn.
if they're trying to sell the house.
Yeah, but this says you have to have screens in it during the summer.
Yeah,
So-
that is actually a property maintenance thing. For mosquitoes, insects, and such, you have to have screens in your windows during parts of the year. In the winter, it's not enforceable.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know we had regulations like that. The last one I have is who trumps, the fire department or our safety inspection? So in Metro West, I know is the only one that does that, but I would say that at least from a safety standpoint, there's a lot in there. So if they go in and say it's all okay, and the county comes in and says, no, it's not okay. They can go ahead and they get a clean, the second trip in from the fire district, they get a clean bill to go. We say, no, you can't. Then the appeal process that we would control has nothing to do with the fire district.
No,
If
there
we said that
there
they
isn't
can't.
one that trumps the other. You have to pass both inspections. It's similar to if you hire a personal inspector to come out and inspect your house, it's going to be far more detailed and they're gonna go into things like deeper as far as like the chimney, as far as this is a general life, health, safety inspection and does not cover everything. And chances are your personal inspection will cover, like, have more in it than our inspector would catch. And so it's not a matter of one trumping the other. It's a matter of you have to pass both inspections. And that's,
So part of the communication then will be to be able to explain to the homeowners association how out of these 6 items, only 3 of those would be critical enough not to pass. Is that correct? Or they all 6 have to be done?
I think it depends on what the items are.
Well, I mean, on one list, we have a whole lot of stuff,
Uh,
but yet then we're saying there's some critical things that are on there that probably.
I would say that in my experience, as far as giving an occupancy permit, I would say that all of the things that get written up as far as, any violations noted by St. Louis County will have to be taken care of unless they can't be, and they would have to get permission. They would have to get a temporary occupancy permit, which would only be granted in the case of extenuating circumstances. Temporary occupancy permits are not fun to follow up with and not fun to deal with. I would say that
Oh, I agree.
they're a rarity as opposed to the norm. And so there wouldn't be a list of these 6 items have to be done because again, you never know what you're gonna find. I've found some really interesting things doing inspections.
No, I totally get it. I just think that it's gonna be really hard to communicate this, other than say, just go ahead and get your inspection, and then they're gonna come back with all of those issues, because some of that stuff I think is really hard for us or the county to be the final inspection on it. So I'm just curious, so.
Most people would opt to have a personal inspection done anyway if they're buying the house. I would.
When you're gonna have, I think you
Yeah.
want to do that too, but because that's not our big problem. Our people, they're not living in it. They've got other people coming in just paying cash to get in there as quickly as they
Sure.
can. And it's every month they go with it not being rented is, one more reason. And that's why I can see the owner would say, oh, tenant has to pay for that. And the tenant say, well, I'm not gonna do it. The owner's gonna do it. I'm paying rent. And so we're kind of in the process of the enforcement of how it gets done.
Usually this process ends up, people get things fixed pretty quickly when they have money riding on it. This process tends to be more effective than our code enforcement process in which you have to give people X amount of days. People are usually very eager to move in or get their tenant moved in. And so therefore things get addressed much quicker.
Good.
Especially when you say, no, you can't have a temporary occupancy permit. It's amazing how fast those windows get fixed.
I would suggest though, as you're gonna write it up, that the whole part about the city administrator holding the assessment and how we charge special taxes.
Yeah.
We've got to really have that worked out really well.
Of course.
Because when you say, well, now we're gonna start taxing people for any special needs that they have, that's not something that we're really good at.
Of course, and that's definitely a conversation to be had with the attorney, with our city attorney.
Great, thank you.
As far as getting all of that worked out, this was just kind of this is kind of how it's gonna work and we'll move with it from here.
Councilman Rottenberg?
Thank you. Under exterior property maintenance, exterior general, 5th bullet point down, air conditioner says properly set, maintained, and disconnect secured with padlock or zip tie. So I think we need a little clarification there. Typically, a disconnect switch is required under the National Electrical Code to be within sight of a piece of electrical equipment. And disconnects for air conditioners are, right? Because they're within about like 5 or 6 feet of the air conditioner and typically mounted on the side of the house. However, it's unclear to me whether this is requiring the disconnect to be secured with a padlock or zip tie in the closed position or in the open position. Because if it's secured in the closed position and the air conditioner motor starts to burn out and smoke starts to come up from it, we don't want to be looking around for a key or something of that sort in order to open the disconnect switch up. And typically the only time you would secure an air conditioning disconnect would be to secure it in the open position while the maintenance man is working on it. So I think this, we need a little bit more clarification under what we mean there with the disconnect switch being secured with padlock or zip tie.
Absolutely. I will look into that. And if anyone notices any other issues with anything else on these lists, by all means, please feel free to email me them and we'll definitely get it straightened out before it goes out to the public. That's my goal.
And so that's what my question was gonna be regarding this then, the direction you're looking for this evening was to feedback on the changes that were made and what we've been discussing, but then the next step was to, aside from preparing legislation, set up that meeting with the public. So are we tabling this? Are you looking to table this then till the next meeting so we can have any additional feedback or suggestions? Or are we looking to actually schedule that first meeting with the public?
If you feel that it needs more work, then you can definitely table it, absolutely. If you feel that we're at a comfortable enough place that we could, present our general process to the public and have those comments, question ability, and also, because this is going to be modified once we get comments and such, I'm sure. And so that's actually 100% up to the committee as to their comfort level with moving this forward. But I would say that these are all in draft form and malleable until they're written. And therefore, if you're comfortable moving forward with having public comments and presenting this to the public, then I would say we should probably shoot for having a meeting or a couple of meetings in February, and determine who all we would like to invite, how many meetings.
Do we want to, and I got you coming, I want to just say, like, I think some of Councilmember Marshall's suggestions and comments, I guess, do we want to, I guess we could set up, say, like, let's go ahead and if the committee's on board with this, set up a meeting for February, which gives us a little bit of time. And then maybe between now and January, anyone on the committee can provide additional feedback to Ms. Ripito, and maybe we can button up some of these delivery mechanisms that we were discussing as far as just when we have that first meeting with the public, that we kind of come forth with more confidence as far as like, this is how this is going to work and this is why.
Absolutely.
Versus, some of the more ambiguous, like Councilmember Rotberg mentioned and Councilmember Marshall, like, I think we're on the right track. You've done a great job at putting this together. And I think the feedback was well taken and worked out. I just think some of the delivery talking points on some of these things, if we sound a little bit more like, we've done extensive looking into this and this is why, and it's going to be real simple and easy from a transparency perspective and ease, it will just come across better to the public when we have that meeting versus,
Absolutely. And we do have a meeting before February. So if we want
yeah,
to
that's what I was
move
gonna say,
forward with,
maybe.
working on getting the invitation worked out and then, before the meeting, go over it, make
Yep.
sure that we're 100% and then.
And I think it's pretty simple and straightforward. I just think that it does, this particular type of topic runs the risk, if it's not delivered properly, can
Sure.
open a bee's nest of people, because you're gonna already have, I think, some
I feel like
people that are gonna
that
come
is-
into it. There's gonna be some people that are gonna come into that meeting already, concerned and feeling like it's something that they shouldn't have to deal with. So I think if we're just are able to convey how simple and transparent and the value that it brings, it'll just be better for everybody involved, I think.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Rotberg?
Um,
I'm sorry, Councilmember
Teresa.
Dodwell.
I just wanted to make sure that we get before our next meeting, the attorney to look over the document to ensure all these documents are keeping us out of harm's way, keeping our residents and our property owners out of harm's way. That's all I wanted to say.
Councilmember Rotberg?
Thank you, and I promise I won't make any more comments after this. But just going back to my bullet point on the air conditioner, I think probably what you want to have there is disconnect switch must be able to be secured with padlock or zip tie in the open position for servicing.
Councilmember Clark?
I think that what you were talking about, Mike, was really important, that we do need to go over this. Just sitting here through this and we all read it, it's coming up with, oh, did I even think about that? You know, in looking at it now and seeing address minimum 4-inch Arabic numerals properly affixed and visible from the street, a lot of people in Ward 1 are gonna be like, you can't see my house from the street,
Mhm.
right? So there's a few things that are specific to each ward. And I don't know, I think I would like to read it again. I think that you know, I read it, but I missed some of this stuff, so I need to read it again.
Absolutely, and all of these are based off the property maintenance code or the building code requirements, or I think that the post office even includes the address minimum. And so if we wanted to exceed that, that's definitely like if we wanted, you know, stricter requirements, then that's something that we would definitely have to, you know, let St. Louis County know as well. So, yeah, absolutely.
For our houses, a lot of us have mailboxes that aren't close to our house.
Sure, well,
So
that would
that
be.
number would be on the mailbox.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so you have property identification. There are also some municipalities that have the addresses painted on the curb. If they don't have either, if they don't have a mailbox, it's not clearly visible from the street, but you definitely have to have identification purposes for not just renting your house, but for emergency
Public
services.
safety.
So I guess at this point then, we'll be looking for a motion to schedule a meeting with the public in February and then give us as a committee between now and our January meeting to bring any additional comments or concerns or suggestions to the department and have those addressed, and then we can talk about that at our January meeting. I guess that would be option A. Option B would be that we just still have the time to provide suggestions and concerns and comments between now and January, but we hold off on scheduling that meeting until everybody can be comfortable that we've dotted the i's and crossed the t's. In the event that we would get to January and there's still questions and concerns, and now we've already scheduled a meeting that we would have to cancel. So I guess those would, the way I see it, unless somebody else has a different suggestion, that we would look to get a motion for option A or to do that, or option B. Would that be correct, Director Vintage?
Yes, and I would probably suggest that I don't know if a motion is actually necessary. If we're just bringing it back after we take your further comments into account and address them in the materials, it'll just be an agenda item. And if you're comfortable, then at the January meeting, then the motion would be to proceed forward. We would get the draft documents to city council at its meeting in February, so they can see it, the other 8, so to speak. And then we would go to the public thereafter.
Okay, so we still have some time then to get
Yeah,
that done. Okay.
Can
That would
we
help.
just make sure that the attorney reviews it in
Yeah,
its
we're gonna
current
have-
state?
Unquestionably.
Mhm.
Again, it was also, part of it was providing it to the committee so that if
Yeah.
you had any suggestions, you know, that could be passed along to the city attorney as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has the documents. We just haven't received
Okay.
comments. But
Okay, so at this point then, I guess everybody here, if you have any questions or concerns, read over it. Let's all please get any of those suggestions to the department between now and the January meeting so that we can
Mhm.
put it to bed on the committee side, so to speak, and then take it to council and go forward.
Sure.
Just one last comment to quell any concerns. I know Melody could write the ordinance like you see it. For the most part, there's ordinances out there that we've looked at to ensure that we weren't going too far afield. And so that's the basis of what you see tonight. We did provide them to Mr. Young, our city attorney. It's a lot of information to review, so I agree. Before we do anything, you all have to have the confidence level that it's legal and we've not missed something or misstated something.
Otherwise, the council's just gonna kick it back to us anyway.
Yeah, we just want to protect.
Councilmember Marshall?
I'm still just a little confused. When we started talking, you talked about this is for single family only. This isn't for multiple family inspections, correct?
All
Oh.
rentals.
So you'd go to Sandalwood and that would be done every time the change of a renter comes in there every month?
Yes. And we actually, Robin Keep, one of our planners, went in there and had a litany of problems. In fact, it was so bad for her, her health was affected.
Yeah.
Because of something that they used as a treatment on the cabinets or something. So
Well, I would just be curious, just looking at the electric changing in these different areas, when you put all of the apartment complexes that we have, you have a couple inspectors doing nothing but this on a regular basis. I mean, it's a lot of inspections when you go through that to any multiple rental place as well.
the good news from at least the Sandalwood Creek perspective is about 70% of the rental units are owned by one entity.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, we'll capture most of them. And then obviously the apartment complexes, there's an ownership. But for the most part, as I say, we feel that it has to be a broad application. And as we are finding out, as we talk about Latitude North 38, there's a lot more rentals in the single family area than one would ever expect. And we've been told about many and problems associated with them. So it's part of the reason we think it's important.
I think the trustees will get behind us big time, but we've got to have it so clear and so buttoned down that they can just say, this is what the city is doing. And they're not getting into a dogfight with the residents or those owners who they can't even get connection with. As a trustee, they know that somebody owns it in Utah, but they have no idea how to do it. So by making it that buttoned down, that the trustees can really support it, then I think that they will be really agreeable on it. It just got to be really simple, and they don't have to interpret anything to anybody.
I think that that's also important as to why we would include the owner and the occupant as both being liable for it, because again, one of the biggest issues that we have in code enforcement is, you know, if it's a renter or, you know, if it is owned by an LLC that's out of state or something like that. And so that's, I feel it's important to have all of that information in there so that that renter, that occupant then becomes responsible for it as opposed to chasing down an owner.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the discussion, everybody. And I think we've got good work, Ms. Ruto, and
Thank you.
we've got some good direction to look forward to the next meeting. So moving on to the next item, under planning matters is the wayfinding signs for town center area. Includes wards 1, 4, 5, 7, and 8. Director Runich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the memorandum prepared for tonight's discussion is a little long on tooth at the front end, but it was intentional to kind of let you know that there's a consistent theme that Mr. Lee, Ms. Ripito, and others in the Department of Planning and Parks here regarding some of the locations of our commercial facilities and the lack of visibility from the major arterials nearby. Certainly one could look at the situation and say, you built a commercial building as a second or third tier property, what was your expectation? And certainly that's an argument that could be had, but for the most part, we're trying to address businesses that want to locate or want to stay in Wildwood, and we want to do it in a fashion that's consistent with town center. Many years ago, the city engaged Kiko about with wayfinding signs. These were on the, so let's say the backside of our Great Streets project and the installation of wayfinding signage out on Route 100 and Route 109. The intent was to emulate those which have been very successful and well received, but on a much smaller scale, meaning not large signs, but signs that would be appropriate for our major arterials in town center, like Manchester Road, New College Avenue, etc. And so this was kind of the schematic that they came up with. The Planning and Zoning Commission authorized a public hearing to talk about wayfinding signs and ultimately have endorsed the concept. The concept would be to do a pilot program, meaning we wouldn't start out with a grandiose plan for all of the components of town center. We would start with one particular area and begin with maybe just a few signs and see what the response is, if they're helpful, if they're not, if they're achieving the goals we set out when we began the discussion. And so tonight the department is presenting a pilot program for input. And also equally important, if not more important, the Planning and Zoning Commission identified 4 areas in their discussions, which are identified in your report. And those areas, for the most part, would have the name at the top, and then the major users or land activities associated with them to help and assist. So the department is seeking input from the committee on those names. One is obviously Route 66, which would include Old Manchester Road, the Grover and Pond communities. The other is the Bridge District, and that would be Route 100 and Route 109, where we have 3 pedestrian bridges. The other would be the College District, which seems a natural with the YMCA, the community college, et cetera. And then the final one, which is on the next page, would be the Downtown District, which is here. And that's the one you see prominent as part of the Kiko Lovato item. And so tonight, again, to summarize, let me seeking input on a pilot program, and then your thoughts on these particular names, if they're satisfactory, or if you have suggestions. This has not been finalized by Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's why the department wanted to bring it to you to get your all's input before we get too far along. Thank you.
Any questions? Councilman Randall?
Yeah, I love it. The names are really cool. Bridge District baffled me. I understand the logic now. Maybe we can do a little bit better there, but the other ones are spot on. I love College District and I love Downtown District and so forth. And my question is the pilot program covering all of those? Or are we just gonna do like one sign and see how it works out? Or, because if so, I would suggest the Downtown District as the first one.
And I think that's a logical starting point because this is where our biggest concentration of businesses are, and this is really a business effort, I think. And so the intent was to do several signs, if not maybe a half a dozen, and do them at those key locations. The cost will dictate probably the final number as we move forward with fabrication. We have a company that can do all of this work for us, the Designery. They've done other work, and there's others out there that we'll get bids from. But we'll work on the Bridge District. Yes, the Downtown District is an option.
It's very sad to me that the Miller House was such a great facility. It, dog friendly and just a wonderful place. And I think they had trouble getting traffic for the exact reason that you mentioned. And I would love for them to still be there. And had we had this in place, it could have helped them out. So I think it's a really good move. And I congratulate you guys for coming up with it.
Okay, Councilmember Dodwell,
It's okay. That was the same thing I was gonna say.
Councilmember Martoni.
I like it and I'm completely supportive of it. The only recommendation would be, since this is business driven, as you said, Joe, let's maybe move shops and restaurants to the top and City Hall to the bottom. City Hall, police, I mean, of those, City Hall should be at the bottom, but maybe restaurant shops at the top, then police, just let's give them the benefit of the doubt since they're the one trying to help.
Okay, Councilmember Clark.
Just extending this after the pilot plant or the pilot program. The one problem I find in on Old Manchester is that a lot of people that live in Wildwood don't even know it's there. They don't even know. So is there any way to put some of the wayfinding signs like on Highway 100 at down by the post office where it cuts into Old Manchester, and add some signs that direct people over to it?
Well, certainly the extent is up to the committee and ultimately city council. There's an alternative if we wanted to maybe lessen the cost of our pilot program, but still draw interest toward it. And that would be doing more traditional traffic signs that would be placed there. Now, for example, if you drive west of Route 109 on Old Manchester Road right by Old Pond School, we installed one of those traffic signs. It's black, it's white, reflective. It says the Pond Historic District ahead. There's an opposite one at Bethel Church as you come in the direction. That's an option. I guess it's not part of the downtown district, so we're expanding the pilot program and adding additional costs, and I'm trying to be cognizant of that.
Councilman Rattenberg?
I guess to tag on to what Councilmember Clark mentioned, I agree with her that many residents don't even know that the old Route 66 thoroughfare there even exists. And I'm just curious if we should consider one of these a sign identifying, maybe rather than a pond district, historic Route 66 corridor or something like that.
We can certainly do that.
And I just mentioned that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, go ahead.
jump back in, but in my travels, sometimes when I've been traveling internationally, whenever I talk to tourists who talk about coming over here, inevitably, for whatever reason, it especially seems to be the case in the UK, they talk about renting a car in Chicago and driving Route 66 all the way out to the west.
Mhm.
And, you know, because I don't know if they saw the old Route 66 TV show or what it is, but
And there's a Europe, they think you can do that in about 3 hours.
yeah, yeah, and you know, they always talk about Route 66 and wanting to drive Route
Yeah.
66.
All right.
I was just gonna say that it's just hard to do, but when you have a sign up on 100, you gotta make sure that people can read it. Because nothing, in my opinion, is so hard to try to read something, especially when you're driving faster. Now, when you're down on Old Manchester, it doesn't have to be, but I think so often the signs people put them out, and you can't read them. So I think, and I'm sure that the people will know exactly how we have to do that so that they can see it, or so that they can see it. If we know, for example, there's 5 cars backed up the stop sign, then that would probably be a good place to have it on the other side of the stoplight where you're not driving by. What was that, what that said? In order to do that, so.
Councilman Dadwell?
I was just gonna reiterate, the Route 66 district may be what we really want to start with, just because it is somewhat of a tourist attraction that would hopefully bring in some additional people, even though our downtown district is tied to that Route 66 district, because I'm having trouble understanding the difference between Route 66 district and the downtown center area. Could we make that all one?
Can certainly merge the two. But if the inclination of the committee is to do the pilot on Route 66, that's easy as well.
City Administrator Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on kind of the difference of the different districts and getting feedback from the businesses. What I think the goal of the pilot program, but the program in general, would be to kind of create a unique identity for each individual component of our town center. One item here, obviously, the downtown area. What I think of when I think of downtown, I'm thinking of almost the town center of town center, which would include Main Street, Taylor, Plaza, Fountain, in the Deerbergs area. That would be kind of right where town center is, the dead center of it. Whereas the Route 66 portion would be more so along Manchester. So the goal, I would believe, here on the business side would be to identify unique districts and then also highlight the attributes of said districts to make them stand out, and also make kind of create this vibe, if you will. If you're going out on the town, what district do you want to explore today, kind of deal. I will say that the business community is in high support of this program. It does answer a lot of different questions and needs that they've been presenting to the city. Another item I wanted to just really quickly note was that any signage along Highway 100 or state routes will be a little bit more tedious, just because of the fact that those are technically not our roads. So we would have to get the proper permission. And to Councilmember Marshall's point, I believe the signage would need to be fairly red. It'd be a little bit larger in size, but we obviously want to keep in the back of our minds that we want this signage to be attractive. We want it to be promoting our uniqueness of our town center, but we don't want to distract drivers too much from the, what they're supposed to be doing, driving, for the public safety component. So just keeping these really on the, what I look at it as potentially just keeping it on more city adjacent streets and also having it more isolated towards that town center, I think would probably be the best way to look at this. But another one that I was thinking of was potentially having the Village View Plaza over there off West Glen. Potentially having another sign out there, which we could potentially work on. The problem is it's right on Highway 100, so working to get some notification over there too, because one of the concerns I would have from the business community would just be that we put up one sign or two, and some areas of town center, maybe those businesses might not be, they might feel like they're being left out during the pilot program, even though we might have the intent to cover the rest of the areas outlined, at a further date. But just wanted to keep those considerations in mind, and more than happy to answer any questions on that. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or concerns? Councilmember Clark?
One question. So, I couldn't on my phone enlarge that enough to see. Is that the flag that's on that says at the flat elevation? I think it says metal icons. That's the flag. So sometimes I see our flag with the trademark symbol, and sometimes I see it without.
When this was completed by Kiko Bada, we had yet to trademark the logo and icons. And so this predates it, so yes, we would have the copyright component. Thanks for.
Okay. Okay, so as far as direction from the committee, I know planning and zoning is still working on this as far as what they're gonna do. What are you looking for, anything specific from us outside of the discussion?
Outside the discussion, no, and I think I've gotten good information to bring back to the Planning and Zoning Commission on the starting point. Here's that there's either downtown or Route 66. We'll let them weigh in and then bring it back to you all as the city council. And then certainly the other comments that were provided about the ordering of the components. We'll take all those into account and provide a report with the letter of recommendation to Planning and Zoning Commission regarding.
Okay, sounds good, fair enough. With no further discussion, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Murrigan Temple of St. Louis Public Space Plan, Ward 1. Director Runich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you know, a second temple is being proposed in the city of Wildwood. In this particular instance, it's on a property that's 15 acres in size and defines the southernmost end of our town center area. Over the course of the submittal of plans, the department has consistently advised the leadership of the temple of the public space component. And then this particular instance, the public space component was very specific in that for a number of years, the city had been looking at this particular property to install a trail that would link the southern end of town center, which is inclusive of the community college and the Wildwood Family YMCA, to Rockwoods Reservation. The city went as far with the concept and contacting the Missouri Department of Conservation, and they actually endorsed the trail component. As we went through this process, we heard from the residents that border the temple site in the Meadows of Wildwood and their concerns about the location of the proposed trail. And that was, for all intents and purposes, right in the backyard. And certainly we understood that. As that concept was evolved, the department did identify, to the benefit of the temple, that Phase 2 stormwater requirements are a 1-to-1 credit to the public space. Ultimately, the engineer for the temple identified that all of their public space requirements, premised on the number of parking spaces, would be met by the bioretention, the amenable soils, the pervious pavement, etc. This would be the first instance where we approved a new place of worship without a public space component that's actually usable, not being part of it. A couple of days ago, Ms. Ripito and I were going back and forth, and ultimately an idea came to us in that, what if, instead of doing a formal trail, paved surface 10 foot wide, that ultimately might impact and would impact the homeowners in Meadows Wildwood, obtain a variable width trail easement, do a natural surface trail that would connect to the natural surface trails in Rockwood's Reservation. This was presented to the leadership of the temple and they're supporting it. So tonight, the department is seeking an endorsement by motion, second, and voice vote of this as a component of the public space plan.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Director Vinich. Like to make a motion?
How many parking spaces, Jeff?
It's 250, as I recall. It's my own.
Councilmember Barthoni?
I'll take a motion, but I have a question.
Okay,
I can second it.
a motion and a second question?
Joe, has this been discussed with the Meadows of Wildwood? Are they also okay with this?
I've met with the president of the homeowners association, John Bird, and I explained to him the direction the temple was heading in terms of the public space, and now it was not inclusive of the trail and trail easement along the common boundary. And he said, that's good for us. And so the next step was this. So with the endorsement of the committee and ultimately the entire temple leadership, we had 3 of the, I think 5 or 6 we met today to talk about this. We'll let them know that we think we've solved a really tough nut.
Yeah.
Points out what big problems.
Location.
And so if I'm remembering correctly, like about, I want to say 2 years ago, so it was probably 5 years ago, we met up there and kind of talked about where this trail would connect with Rockwood. If I remember right, it ended up being kind of like a rainy, muddy day too, so it just didn't work out like to the best of circumstances. But is this going to connect where that ideally we were talking about back then?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Yes, the idea is to make that connection at the logical point. And along that common boundary, the south boundary of the temple site and the north boundary of that portion of Rockwood's Reservation, that trail kind of, it's a bit of a parallel. It's not a long distance, but there is a bit of a parallel. So the challenge will be is making that connection up that grade. The benefit though is without the paved surface, we can do a single track natural surface. And the variable width gives us the opportunity to meander and maybe do some, I can't think of the word, it just slipped my mind, this double back, where you crisscross back and forth and can't think of the name.
Switchback.
Switchback, thank you, ma'am. Very good.
That was
Good
too
job.
simple. I thought
Pinpoints.
he's gotta be talking about something else.
Good job.
Yeah, you could do some switchbacks. I was
Sorry,
gonna-
Ms.
I was
Clark,
gonna-
that was helpful.
I was gonna ask about that because of the erosion issue along any trail we put there. That's a very steep grade. And so a switchback with retention of some of the existing floral plant material would keep us from having it just run straight down a straight trail.
We've got to address, it'll be a tough trail,
Yeah, it won't be an easy one.
right? But in lieu of nothing, I think it's a good balance.
Okay. Does anybody else, any Councilmember Clark?
Yeah. This is more on the question about the parking. So I didn't see any van parking. Accessible van parking. Should be one for, I looked and looked and I could not find the van parking.
The recollection is this one up here is identified as non-accessible. This may not be the best sheet to see it. The total package that's been submitted by the engineer for the temple, it's about 8 to 10 pages. My recollection is that it identifies on the larger sheet.
I guess when I looked at the measurements, I didn't.
Yeah, it's hard to
The
see the
van,
scale.
size, but
And If you don't mind, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
go ahead.
It does have, it's on one of the, whoops, I just lost it. On one of the pictures, it does show it, Teresa.
We'll double check. I'm sure the identification here. Signed and accessible.
Yeah, but you've got an 8 foot and is it 6? Is that 8 foot, 8.5 foot?
I need my other contacts for that.
Yeah.
We'll double
Okay,
check it.
okay.
for you.
Okay, but I just wanted to especially say thank you so much for all you've done to put this together, because I know this has been a long time coming and, you know, residents have been asking about this and I bugged you about it too.
Really good. It's a good solution.
Yeah.
It works right. It's a win-win-win, it seems
Yeah.
like to me. So.
Today, they made a commitment relative to the irrigation that was installed off property. The temple is going to allow it to stay. They're going to get some kind of agreement that just gives them some liability protection and that they don't have to maintain it in the future. So that's according to the temple leadership, they were told by the trustee association, that's like a $50,000 fix to get it back onto their property. And so it's a big savings. So again, Mr. Chair, if there's an endorsement of this concept, the department would.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. We got a motion and a second. So with no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The only question I had, Director Lynch, is,
Sorry, I didn't. mean to-
and this is more of, and this is a post vote comment, but are they gonna be using a different contractor than the temple on 109?
They've been working down there.
You did mention the length of time to construct the other facility. And so they're aware it's been a slow process, so. I think hopefully that awareness will lead them to a quicker project.
Okay, all right. Moving right along, the last thing under planning matters is just the departments, the recent development trends, which I think is an informational, right? So is there any questions or comments related to that? Seeing none, we'll move
Mr.
on.
Chair, just a shout out to Ms. Ripito. We use MyGov now for all of the permit components, and so thank you for funding it and Ms. Ripito, but it's just, we can sort by ward, we can do all that stuff, so hopefully. it's
Thank
easy to
you all.
read.
Excellent.
Onward and upward.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Moving on to parks matters, we've got Bluffview Park, the hub sign and cost estimate, Director Brunich.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you know, a while back, when we were still meeting in the council chambers, representatives from Gateway Off-Road Cyclists visited and discussed with us the need for a sign at what they called the hub to help people know where they are, the trail system within the Bluffview Park area, and then answer the questions they get all the time. Well, what was this? Who owned it? This, that, the other. The committee endorsed proceeding forward with the development of a sign and getting a cost estimate. So tonight before you is the agreed upon design of the sign. The sign has been provided to us by the designery, which has done most of our trail signage, not all. And Gateway Off-Road Cyclist has reviewed it as well. And we do have a cost estimate associated with it. And that cost estimate, as noted in the memorandum, does not include the restoration of the columns, the stone columns, their placement, and the attachment of the sign to them. As you'll recall, though, we have a great group that does a lot of work out there, and their point to us was, we'll be glad to get the columns where we need them. And we'll do any work that needs to be done to minimize costs.
Good.
So tonight, sign manufacturer is $10,000. And then I would assume there will be some charge to us for the installation. And the department is presenting it to the committee for feedback. And if you endorse the sign and want to proceed forward, certainly that would be in a form of a motion.
So $15,000 to $16,000 estimated installation, all included, not counting any reduction in cost by
Yes.
cyclists helping.
it wouldn't be fair to tell you, yeah, we're gonna cover the installation. You should know the full cost if all else fails. And then if we inevitably can save money through the use of our volunteer network, then great, we'll come back and let you
And
know.
it's already fully funded within the budget.
Yes, we have a capital improvements program component. And this for upcoming 2024 is $50,000. We very seldom spend all of that. That's why I feel comfortable at the start of the year. If this is something you'd like to proceed forward with, we can do.
Councilmember Clark, then Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, so I guess I'm disappointed that I don't see Braille on this sign,
Yeah, I was-
especially since we're talking about possibly having a loop over in the park for blind.
I'll go back to the drawing board. As you know, it's
Well, it'd be a big sign if you, I mean,
Unnecessarily, you just put the Braille underneath.
You just put the Braille underneath this current sentence. So you space it, you double space it instead of single space it and Braille it underneath.
And you can put the Braille right there on the letters too, and it doesn't take up any space. Just raise the letter.
I think the width of the sign could be accommodated. I think we may just have to make it a little taller in height so we can do exactly what was described.
Could you abbreviate the property history a bit without losing its meaning?
Well, surprisingly, I didn't write that, so that's not my fault. It's that long. Sign this bill. Yes, certainly. I'll get you the text and maybe you should see what we're proposing in a more visible format.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with this length. I was just, curious if that might be one solution to accommodate Councilmember Clark's concern.
And is this, the Director Vintage, what's the timeline on this? So, I mean, we're not under Cypress trick.
Oh, no. I think if we install the sign anytime before the, let's say, the spring season, we have a success.
So would it be acceptable to have the sign company
Yeah.
amend the proposal to include the Braille?
Yes,
And then
so
we can look at it in January.
the department would request that this matter be postponed.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Marshall?
With all of the wording and stuff, I know we don't do a lot, but maybe we could do a QR code so the people that really want to scan it and read it could do that, and you're not taking the whole sign up for all of that history. Just another.
well, if you're blind, you can't find the.
Well, no,
QR
I'm not saying that as far as I think the Braille sign, but you wouldn't have to have all of that. If you just wanted a history of it, you could put that history on a QR code, and the people who want more detail could take that with them and look at it. So, and you might not need 4 or 5 of the extra sentences. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Teresa, quick question for you. Is there a QR code method for a blind person to determine it's a QR code and know to scan it, and then it can be read to them? I didn't.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
just asking.
not that I know.
Okay, I'm just curious.
well,
Yeah.
look forward to get that updated.
I'm sure we
They
can
had
figure out something.
Audio.
And if we convey to the sign company what we're trying to accomplish, perhaps, I'm sure they've been asked this question
They've done
before.
both.
Yeah, so they probably have some ideas of options that can be done. So, okay, well,
Chair?
yes.
City Administrator Lee has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking of
I'm
ideas.
sorry.
Oh, you're okay, Chair. Thank you very much. I was just thinking of some ideas here. Maybe we could do a QR code that has Braille next to it that says there's a QR code directly above this, but then I started hitting a wall there because then that needs to access a phone and point in the right direction and all that. So I was starting to get an idea in my mind to get things moving along here, but I think it kind of hit a wall there. So I do apologize.
Yep, no worries. All right, well, Director Vintage is going to look into that and we'll see what we can come up with. And revisit this back in January with some additional insight and numbers related to the updated proposal. So without any, Councilmember Rambo?
We've discussed QR codes and the future iterations of such for our historical markers and so on and so forth, then we just need to sort of incorporate whatever we're trying to do into this same design here. And that can be just a ubiquitous thing, and everybody that goes there you know, if there's a Wildwood sign, it's probably gonna have a QR code on it.
Yeah.
Give you some more history and so, so.
Well, as you know, with the latest historic marker, we were concerned that QR codes may go the way of
Yes,
the Edsel
that was my
eventually.
comment, but
So that's why we did the band around the.
Yep, exactly.
So as if we need to change it, it's not cast as part of the sign.
It might need to be on one of the posters or next to it or something like that. I'm just suggesting we include it somehow. And future-proof it by making it removable. I got a feeling QR code's gonna stick around a while, but who knows?
And I don't know, it was just something that came up in Historic Preservation Commission. We addressed it as best we could, and my apologies to all for not thinking through the Braille component.
No,
You slipped my mind.
that's why we have the meeting.
While we're here, yeah.
So, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Portner Park planning process, Award 6. Director Vunich?
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, as you know, at the recent city council meeting, we had a discussion regarding the committee, volunteer committee for the concept or master plan for Portner Park. And as you know, there was a suggestion to reduce the size of the committee and ultimately submit any names that you might have to the mayor for consideration. And so tonight, I just wanted to review the makeup of the committee. It will be the 2 Ward 6 council members. It'll be a representative from either one of the 2 subdivisions that border the property, that being the estates at Deer Hollow or Hingham Valley Estates, 2 at-large members from Ward 6, and then for the rest of you, 2 at-large residents from the other wards. And so I'm here tonight to advise you of that. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Rambo have looked at Ward 6. And then from the committee's perspective, if you'd like to consider with your partners in the wards, potential candidates, submit them to the mayor. We'd like to get this process started sometime in the first quarter of 2024. Any questions?
Any questions or comments from anybody? Councilmember Rambo?
Yeah, there was an observation that the representation was Ward 6 centric or heavy on Ward 6 representation. I think it's appropriate because this is a pocket park and it's right there, and it's not likely to be a destination park in Wildwood. So, but I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with this breakdown before we go forward and then somebody shoots it down because there's not in Ward 5, whatever.
Councilmember Godwell?
Just a quick question on item D as the members. You're saying 2 at-large residents selected from the other 7 wards. That's not 2 per ward, right? That's just 2. Oh, okay. 2 bodies.
Yeah.
He's counting going,
Heads off,
holy cow, that's a
I'll change
huge.
that.
No. Never.
So is everybody cool with that? That's my question. Okay, good.
Well, to respond to you, this was actually endorsed and voted upon by the city council at the conclusion of the discussion, so. certainly-
This here?
Yeah.
Okay, I must have missed
So
that.
that was just a member of folks, you guys figuring out the people from Ward 6 and then the other at-large members from the other wards, just anybody that's interested to be submitted to the mayor for consideration. Appointment.
Okay.
Thank you. Very well said.
Awesome. Very good.
Such a reminder, if you remember our last update of the master plan, I think we had 22 on the 20 some odd on the volunteer committee. We filled this room
Yeah.
just with the members.
Well, I think we should be well equipped to get those nominations sent to the mayor and moving forward, so.
Do we have anybody who has sent in requests to sign up for assistance,
Park stuff.
park stuff?
There was an individual, it was
Fox Creek.
Yep.
Bermel and New.
So there's been a couple people, and I'll certainly get those to council members Jaxie and Rambo.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Director Brunich, and the discussion with everybody else. And seeing no further discussion, we'll move on to the next matter under Parks, which is the Western Greenway signage plan and by Great Rivers Greenway for Ward 6.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, there's no action required on this particular item, but it is going to be a major change along the Hamilton Carr Greenway, the Al Foster Memorial Trailhead and the Al Foster Memorial Trail. Great Rivers Greenway, which designs, purchases, and installs signage along these two corridors and in the vicinity of the trailhead, are changing the look of the sign. And more importantly, I think, and a benefit to all of us here in the city of Wildwood, reducing the number of signs along the corridors. According to the leadership at Great Rivers Greenway, when they did a survey of the corridors across the region, both St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and St. Charles County, one thing they heard overarching was there's just a whole lot of signs and it really detracts from the area. And so they've taken that to heart. This is just being presented to you, so if you get questions in the future or you see changes, you know what is being done and why it's being done. If there are any questions, we've had several meetings with the project manager at Great Rivers Greenway. They've been productive because they have actually brought together MDNR, St. Louis County, the city, and then GRG, partners that we work together and not necessarily talk a lot to each other. So, and just so you know, over the years, Castlewood State Park, their river access has been very, very dangerous. Most summers, there was at least one drowning, if not more. They've blocked river access at that location in Castlewood State Park. I was surprised to learn they send canoeists and kayakers to Glencoe, and that small river access by the bridge that takes you into phase 2. That's where they encourage them to access the river now. So I was a little surprised by that.
Hopefully it doesn't get.
Does anybody have any questions or concerns for the department?
No, this is great.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that presentation, Joe, and it looks great as well. I think the signs look really cool. Which brings us then to the department, more informational in-person and virtual recreation programs and facility reservations, event registrations, and long-term maintenance costs for parks and trail facilities. Does anybody have any questions or concerns related to any of those? Councilmember Clark?
Just a suggestion on the Hometown Heroes to get the word out, maybe when it, maybe more often on Facebook or the social media, put that on there and also put that now you don't have to have the 8x10 picture, and maybe even that the person honored doesn't have to have been from Wildwood. It's like, I don't think everyone knows that. I think this is such a good program you've got.
Absolutely. I appreciate the recommendation.
Ms. Clark, you're giving yours to
To my brother for Christmas, yeah.
get a photograph. That could be some good publicity for us.
Yeah, that's
he-
awesome.
He came in town to be one of the grand marshals in the Celebrate Wildwood with it too.
Is it a surprise or does he know he's getting it?
It was gonna be a surprise, but he kept asking me, what's gonna happen with that after? And I said, it's gonna be your Christmas present.
Well, tell him to look surprised in the photograph.
So you don't have to be,
That's awesome.
your last name doesn't have to be Ripito then.
No, but it might be lined with family
Yeah.
members of mine, so.
I'm working
Got a
on
long
3
history,
Jackies, but it
military
has,
background.
it's going slowly.
Awesome. All right, guys. Next item on the agenda is executive session matters, and we don't have any items for consideration there, which brings us to not ready for action under planning and parks. There's a list of things that tend to be there from month to month, so unless somebody has something outstanding that they'd like to address, seeing none, we'll move along. Other matters for consideration, basically, oh, Councilman Rottenberg.
Before the evening was out, I just wanted to say to Director Vunich at the beginning of this meeting, I had asked you for an update on Bellevue Farms. And after you gave your update, I neglected to say thank you, so thank you.
I appreciate it. But like I
Thank
said,
you.
it was kind of a good meeting and bad meeting. The 20 acres, we've invested in, the Friends of Bellevue invested so much time and volunteers from all over the region. MDC said, it looks great. You're worrying about something you don't need to, and then on the downside, it was like, no, we can't fund that. We can try.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, this brings us to the next stage here, which is the next meeting, which is Tuesday, January 23rd of 2024, believe it or not. We're done with 2023, so that's unbelievable. I feel like it was just January like a minute ago, but so be it. With that being said, does anybody have anything under miscellaneous? I'll say wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday and Happy New Year.
Thank you for the cookie.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Clark,
All
for the
year
amazing
long.
cookies. Yes. Thank you for the committee over the course of this year for being so responsive and open and great discussions. Moving things along. So, Councilmember Ottenberg,
I will make a motion to adjourn.
make that motion. Do we have a second?
We have 2 minutes left, though.
We did good.
Real slow getting up.
Rob, you can stay there.
We got a second is not a discussion on the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Aye.
With that being said, I'll
Thank you, Tom.
minutes early, guys.
Don't get used to it, right?
Yeah.